It's remarkable how President Trump can go hot and cold on different people, but it all adds up to a certain logic that in its own Trumpian universe kind of makes sense, because while I think he's still making a lot of mistakes in how he deals with Russia, and certainly at the press conference he did, I also see sort of a learning process, and he has been fairly emphatic in recent days that he's going to be tough on Russia, and the policy elements of the administration often wind up being tougher. But Donald Trump also has this sense that it shouldn't be like the Cold War again, that the kind of issues we're concerned about today with Russia, you know, the security of eastern Ukraine, the civil war in Syria, these are important issues, but they're not quite as existential for the Western world as the Soviet threat to West Germany or other parts of the core industrial West was during the Cold War. The kinds of threats that we had with the Berlin and Cuban Missile crises really shouldn't be recurring. They aren't recurring, of course, yet, but we see a pathway towards potential rivalry that could get very dangerous. And I think President Trump has said that that doesn't really make sense. Intuitively, it doesn't really compute that we should be in that kind of a place, even if Putin is an unsavory actor, even if we don't admire the way he runs his country. On that point, I actually agree with Donald Trump, and I'm willing to see a dialogue about how we can rethink Europe, rethink the Eastern European countries in particular, like Ukraine and Georgia, where there have been so many clashes, so many problems with Russia, because I really don't think that those countries are strategically crucial enough to the United States that we should wind up almost on the verge of a military confrontation over disagreements in that zone of Europe. So, you know, that's one thing. You have to figure out what to do about it. That's a whole different discussion, and I'm not sure Donald Trump has gotten very far in that dialogue. And you can't kowtow to Russia. You can't concede Eastern Europe to Russia. There has to be a tough, more thoughtful policy than Trump has come up with so far. But I agree with his instinct that the relationship really shouldn't be as bad as it's become.
I think when he used the term competitor for Russia, and I think that was deliberate. Maybe he didn't think about it a long time when he used it, but I think he meant competitor, and I think he kind of views the world that way now. And I wonder whether I'm thinking about China as a competitor. I would imagine in his mind he thinks China is the real threat in terms of economic competition, and probably if the United States is displaced or supplanted at the top of the world as the superpower, it's going to be economically. I don't know if it's going to be with military force right now. And I could almost see in the back of his mind that he's thinking, you know, China is front and center, and you may need, Russia is less of a threat economically, and therefore you sort of are less concerned about the threat from Russia than you are from China. And I think in the back of his mind, he looks at the meddling and everything else almost as business as usual. And I don't know, whether that, I'm not endorsing that viewpoint at all, because it's obviously it's horrific when they meddle in our election. But, over the years, I don't know what countries have done in terms of propping up certain leaders, trying to get rid of other leaders. He probably thinks it's always been done. Therefore, I'm not going to pay attention to it. Is there any? Do you agree with this?
Well, maybe. I think Putin looks at it that way. Putin thinks that
definitely. He looks at maybe sending some poison into it's all sort of business as usual with Putin, and it's scary in that way. And that's the old Russia, that's the old Soviet era KGB Russia we're thinking about there. Right.
But in Putin's mind, he thinks we do it that way all the time.
Right.
That we're always interfering in other people's elections, and he's just in some sense getting even. Listen, I think President Trump also is a proud man. And he doesn't like to admit when he's wrong, and he certainly doesn't want to see his election of 2016 tarnished in any way. So it's always going to be hard for him to acknowledge Russian meddling. On the other hand, he has to find a way to do it, because the issues I mentioned earlier, Ukraine, Georgia, Syria, these may not be top-tier American national security interests, but certainly the integrity of our own democracy is. And therefore, the idea that foreign powers are interfering in our elections cannot be tolerated. So he's got to find some way to be very firm on that point, even though we all have to recognize he's not going to enjoy talking about the 2016 election meddling, and he's never going to be the top person to lead that charge.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.